This week has seen me recording episodes for all three of the shows that I'm a presenter on, and finally starting to learn how to use Descript, while also feeling like a cheat doing as such. Following this intro will be a trailer for the podcast, but you can't stay here. I'm Martin Quabell, known to my friends as Marv, and this is Pods Like Us Chronicles.
Admit it. Sometime in the last decade, you've proclaimed, "I'm leaving the US." Well, I did just that. In 2024, I left and went back to Peru, my home country. I was fleeing heartbreak, a health crisis, and the hole left in my wallet after said health crisis. I promised myself it would be temporary. But I just celebrated my second-year anniversary in Lima, and if I don't actually sit down and think about whether I should go back to this American life, I might stay here forever. Accidentally. Unpopular opinion. I miss the US. I miss my friends. I miss living on my own. I miss the ability to order anything online and have it on my doorstep in a freakishly short time. More than anything, I miss its diversity. The US always felt more like a doorway to the rest of the world. And Peru? Well, Peru is a place with massive political instability, staggering social inequality, limited economic opportunities. We are home to the world's worst traffic jams, an insular culture.
The burbuja is where it's at.
The burbuja is where it's at. And an addiction to inefficient bureaucracy that somehow runs entirely on WhatsApp. But Peru is also where I'm surrounded by family.
¿Quién es tu tía?
Inés.
Where I've reconnected with old friends.
Amiga, hola. ¿Cómo estás?
¿Cómo andamos?
Where the Pacific Ocean is a short stroll away. And where I can access a quality of life that used to feel out of reach. And yeah, the food is that good. And yet, I don't think I can stay here. I left my country for a reason. And I'm having a hard time letting go of the American dream. But what if being here is fulfilling another type of dream? Follow me as I try to find a good answer before my 3-year anniversary comes around. I'll discuss with experts, family, friends, and my own psyche what leaving the US and living in Peru means in terms of politics, finances, friendship, family, dating, and other quality of life issues to see if the grass really is greener here. Listen to But You Can't Stay Here wherever you get your podcasts.
As an extra, here is a clip from a talk back in March of 2025. Whoa. Back in the past. That I had with the queen of podcasting herself, Arielle Nisenblatt. What do you like to listen to yourself podcast-wise?
Thank you for asking. Let's see. I will give you my listening history for the past few days. Okay. This morning, I woke up and I listened to Marc Maron, WTF with Marc Maron, been around forever. I'm listening to episode 1620. He has been making this show since, I don't even know, since the Obama era. He had Obama on a few times. On with Kara Swisher. I like Kara Swisher a lot. I listen every day to the Daily Zeitgeist, which is my favorite news program. They post one episode in the morning and one in the afternoon. I always listen to the Brian Lehrer Show, which is a New York City-based radio program that also gets distributed via a podcast feed. I love it because they break up each of the segments into an episode, so I can pick and choose. I listen to I listen to Secretly Incredibly Fascinating, which is from the Maximum Fun Network. It's about, this is the tagline, why being alive is more interesting than we would think, or something like that. So the most recent episode that I listened to is 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, and it goes into the whole phenomenon of like how humans are connected throughout the world. I always listen to Today Explained from Vox Media. I always listen to a daily show called The Puzzler from AJ Jacobs, which is a daily puzzle show. I think you've listened to that too.
I have, but right? we only get it on Amazon in the UK because of rights issues.
Interesting.
There is a puzzle magazine that's brought out in the UK and has been for nearly 50 years called The Puzzler.
Called The Puzzler.
So it's trademarked and copyright over in the UK, so that's why there's issues with it being on in the UK, but if you're a UK listener and you want to listen to that show, which is fantastic, AJ is hilariously funny in that.
He's awesome.
And so listen on Amazon Podcast or Amazon Music. It's part of now.
Yeah, it's great. So yeah, you'll notice a lot of daily shows and then also a lot of weekly shows that are in there. There's many more, and I could go into them, but it's probably worth subscribing to my newsletter called Earbuds Podcast Collective, which you can get by going to newsletter.earbuds.audio.
Now for something much more recent. You can't get any more recent than this. Here is a clip from the conversation that I had with my friends Kurt and Rob this past week. Enjoy. Yeah,
I think what's really important actually when you're coming back from the background of like being an audio engineer, you've got nothing to reflect on in your space, you know, because it's kind of like it's a little bit like going back and looking at what was happening with stereo and mono when stereo came in. They didn't kind of know what was going off in there, and there's all these quadraphonics and all these other things that's going off there. And then when actually you have to do a little bit of looking backwards to think about looking forwards again and seeing what's like, just like I think what you said something there, which I really loved was, you know, you have to sort of, what's the rule of thumb? We've got to kind of follow the rule of thumb because there's going to be some expectations, isn't there? As a listener, there's and from the audio format, there's some expectations that are just standards. But then also we're trying to be creative and immersive and really set the scene for the person that's listening to have that experience of being there, and that immersive experience is a really rich experience, and really that's what people are taking away from things like that. So what's really interesting, I was just to sorry to interject, but when you're talking about spoken word, you know, that's a whole new space, isn't it? So you kind of have to go back into what's it like when you go and watch a live show and you do like live interviews, and where are people laid out and how does that play out? And then, you know, so I imagine there's a lot of research and sort of like going back onto things in terms of what are the standards to see how you can actually recapitulate it, but within the immersive audio space, and how it translates, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of, the idea of podcasts have been kind of knocked around a bit. So obviously Atmos has been around for like, 12, 13, 14 years now in cinema. So it's only, I think we're maybe like 5 years in terms of music. And then podcast was kind of a little bit later than that. So we knew what we were doing in music, and then there was this idea that you're going to get podcasts in Atmos. In my head, a podcast is, you know, a couple of people sat talking in a room, and I'm like, well, why would you want, you know, like the three of us chatting now, like why would you want to mic up, you know, a whole room so you can kind of picture us three chatting? But then when I really got into it and I started to understand where podcasts were going, and in terms of storytelling and, you know, these documentaries that are working well in it, your scripted audio dramas, you know, essentially you've got, it's basically TV without visual. So you're almost kind of having to do an extra level of work where you've got that visual in mind and you're watching someone on screen. So you've kind of got the cue for like, oh, right, well, that's happening there. So clearly, you know, it's got to happen at this part of, you know, in this section of your peripheral vision, if you like, your ears. But you're having to almost shut your eyes and kind of mix in a way that's like, right, well, I'm going to move this to this section, and then this is going to happen over here, but then what's happening here? There's a lot more going on. Yeah, and I'm sure as well, there's always that reflection of like, is this right? You know, you're always sort of in your head like going, oh man, you know. I think if there's anything that I learned about, there was a really great meme, you've probably seen it, because I know us three have been in that sort of like tech world, and my background's like in audio engineering, as we know. But there's a really great meme, and there's a picture of like a skeleton. He's hanging over like a Neve desk, and there's webs hanging off him. It's like, the mix is nearly finished, you know. And you kind of keep going back and reworking things. But actually, in a professional environment like you're working in, though, you haven't got time to keep doing that. There's got to be like a very clear cut process, I imagine.
On Monday, Stephanie Fuccio posted on Substack about the book Slow AI by Sam Illingworth, a book that I already own and am hoping to sit down to read soon. It is a relatively small book, and I was initially planning to read through it in about 2 hours or so. I can read quickly if I put my mind to it. but I have decided to take my time with it and to take some notes in the hope that I may be able to get an interview with the professor as a guest on the show to discuss the book in more detail. My interactions with Substack, by the way, brought out a problem to me anyway. Trying to navigate my way around Substack has now become a bit of a pain in the neck since the posts that are on people's pages are now no longer in chronological order. Way to go with making it just as infuriating as all of the other social networks out there. Dickheads. I only found by accident Stephanie Fuccio's post about Claude mentioning that it listens to transcriptions. That is an interesting turn of phrase for sure. I may even write a song with AI in the first person and use that. You never know. One of the mentions by James Cridland in Monday's episode of Pod News Daily was a new patch for FFmpeg that helps to make your podcast sound like they have been recorded on a tape cassette, complete with hiss and wow/flutter. Wow indeed. Now, when we first moved to where we live now, I set up a home recording studio in what was the second bedroom of this 2-bedroom house. It's not a very big room, really. So, back to the point. When we moved in, I set up a studio in that second room to write and record music, as well as to record podcasts, with me trying to use the same setup for both. A Shure SM58 microphone plugged into a 4-track tape recorder with an XLR cable, which was then connected to the laptop via an interface that was plugged into the back of the 4-track. Because, strangely enough, I had to buy a cheap interface because it wouldn't work through what is ironically called a pod interface that was from the late 90s. Now, I find that people want that after I am on my 3rd USB microphone since that time. Go figure. Included in the many things that were mentioned on Monday's episode of The Download from Sounds Profitable, Gavin Gaddis spoke about Patreon dropping 20% of their staff, which is 93 jobs in total. The CEO, Jack Conte, said that it's driven by organizational changes and market conditions rather than AI replacing them. Of course it is. Tuesday also saw Ed Kitt and myself from Toppermost of the Poppermost guesting on Ken Michael's Radio Hour, which is available on YouTube. Yeah, that's weird. Radio show with video. Oh well. I suppose if you can still do things at the same time with that in the background and the video doesn't matter, then it's not really a thing, you know. Anyway, I will admit that it niggled at my editor mind, or editorial mind, to be more succinct, when Ken basically said to me, "Be careful what you say and do, because I don't like to edit." I don't think he meant that I was going to say anything naughty. I just think that he didn't want myself, Ed and Kit to waffle, so to speak. Now, to myself and Ed, that was so weird because we edit Toppermost of the Poppermost and When They Was Fab to the extreme. They are really tight edits. I've mentioned this before. So, no edits at all is so far from what we are used to doing. It's alien. Wednesday morning saw me recording a conversation with two friends of mine from more than a few years back. Back in the 2000s, Rob and Kurt were in a band named Black Box Diaries that was a part of the local music scene, of which I was a part of. I played in bands, did some solo gigs, and have been a session musician in my time. Those days are gone, I think. All of us have also been studio sound engineers, although, in comparison, I am a lousy studio engineer. Like I said, in comparison. I get by. Both of them, though, are great sound engineers. Now, when Kurt posted up about a new Dolby Atmos surround mix being available for the podcast I Am Not Nicholas, which is available on Audible and is a co-production of Audible and BBC, I thought, great, now I can have my mate on to discuss that and hopefully big up the superb, award-winning Atmos mix that he did for the latest album by Kylie Minogue. Did I mention that in discussion? You're dang right I did. Because I am the person who has maintained friendships with people over these years, which hasn't been easy while I've been working all of those hours in the previous job, I asked Rob if he wanted to be a part of the talk, and then we could include Rob's work as a music lecturer and examination board advisor, as well as the great work that he does as part of Open Door, where they organise help for people living with dementia, and they also arrange events as well for them. It was a great talk, and we also touched on Rob's issues with ADHD. Hopefully, it will be great fun for people to listen to, and they won't lose interest through the three of us geeking out when it comes to subjects such as sound mapping and things like that, which is part of our DNA being trained sound engineers. John McDermott's newsletter came out on Substack on Wednesday, which started with a jab at podcasting people being at an event in Cannes where they are sunning on the beach. John says it must be nice, while pointing out that these are the sorts of events mainly attended by Hollywood agencies and big corporate production companies. You can read more of my response to that in this Tuesday's Podbites newsletter, including my opinion that it shows an us and them class system is on show. The lower class independents, the middle class podcasters making little something financially to help, and then the upper class corporates slowly trying to push everyone out of the way or trying to pull them into their own fold and control them. If competition was really the thing, then Disney wouldn't have been allowed to own Fox and all the other companies that have been buying out each other. That is not competition. Personal opinion. John also told us of some of his listening that stood out to him. Now, I know he listens to pods like us, but it never seems to be one of those shows that stand out to him in his list. Once I please John, then I know that I will have made it. Perhaps. Podbites on Tuesday, the newsletter, will also feature my worries about legislation due to South Africa presently looking at mandatory licensing for podcasters and other online creators, with the caveat that if they do not have licensing, or if those people then do not have a license, then they will face up to $30,000 worth of fines for podcasting illegally. I finally got to listen to the first episode of the Blanchard House documentary Royal Swindle, which once more shows how great Blanchard House are at these shows. Presenter and co-producer / co-writer Becky Milligan has certainly not let us down with another true story that is stranger than fiction, all about two Australian ladies who swindled UK's so-called horsey set in the late 90s, even going up to royal family. Interesting. I can't wait for episode 2. I'll tell you and all the rest of it. On Wednesday, Stephanie Fuccio published a fantastic article about an experiment that she has run regarding show notes on her Geopats podcast that has had no new episodes for 4 years. I'll tell you, the results were quite eye-opening. Also on Wednesday, I listened to the Comic Book Nation episode from July the 24th, presented by Kofi Outlaw, Matt Aguilar, Janelle Wheeler and Evan Valentine, where Kofi and Janelle mentioned how they had chaired a Comic-Con event before coming to the episode. I think it was the night before, actually, so they were a bit tired. They also discussed the coming of Spider-Man Brand New Day. Well, it was at that point. It's out now. And the release of the first full trailer for Avengers Doomsday. These Marvel products got the presenters then wondering, what will Marvel be doing in all H at San Diego Comic-Con this year, which has happened between that episode and now. So I know what happened, but it's interesting how conversations flow from these things. Tony Doe's podcast, Into the Podverse from Wednesday, gave us some great news to chew on, including a nice dive into the AMP Accords. AMP Accords. An interesting view on the video podcast debate. Details of what happened at podcast Niger that included a good tribute to Tosin Adefeko and an important message for podcasters to try and rest. I am trying, Tony. I am trying. On Thursday, there was a superb look at the Belief in the Future podcast, which wonderfully looked at how the show is an unbiased view of the question of religion's place in the world in years to come, and how the debate about AI, artificial intelligence, might be affecting that. Once again, I believe that it showed why Frank Rasiopi is such a great writer-journalist and how lucky we are to be able to read his writings like this on Substack. The newsletter version of Into the Podverse from Tony Doe came out on Friday, which allowed him to go into more detail on the items that he touched on in the podcast of the same name, and to bring up other news stories that weren't included in the podcast. There is only so much you can include in a podcast that is under 20 minutes. I like that Tony mentioned about the comparisons between podcasting and travel, with both seeing artificial intelligence and reshaping as important aspects in their present forward momentum. On Friday evening, I spent 4 hours in the office recording for Toppermost of the Poppermost, where Ed Kitt and myself discussed the US singles charts for May of 1966. Yes, we are behind on the recording of the episodes as well. Saturday was once more the catch-up day for what I had missed already in the week. I listened to the April the 21st, 2026 episode of AI Girls Club. That's the name, so don't have a go at me for saying that. Where they were looking at the differences between AI, AGI, and ASI. Yeah, right. However, it would be easier if different people didn't have different opinions of what they are. And this was what was mentioned by Grace in the episode. I also thought of 2 trailers that I had listened to recently during this week. Well, I thought this week about 2 episodes that I've heard recently. The first is a minor thing, really, and that is the superb podcast Jacob Reed and Me. Now, I know that I included this trailer at the end of a Chronicles episode a couple of weeks ago, because I do like it. I do like the show, and I think that the trailer is good. However, the show is about a guy who is receiving mail that isn't for him, but is for someone named Jacob Reed. Because of this, he then decides to talk to different people named Jacob Reed so that he can find the right guy. Then at the end, he announces himself. I'm Jacob Reed. This is perfection to me. The slight niggle is that he also announces himself as Jacob Reed at the beginning of the trailer. I know that's a slight niggle, and it is a fantastic show. I just think that announcing himself as being Jacob Reed could have just been left for the end of the trailer, where he goes through it all saying that he's got a letter for this person named Jacob Reed, and he's on a mission to try and find out who this Jacob Reed is, and then at the very end suddenly say, I'm Jacob Reed, but not that Jacob Reed. And this is my podcast, Jacob Reed and Me. That is clever. Or maybe it's just me that thinks that. The other trailer is for a show called The Good Quest. Now, here is me reenacting the trailer. Coming soon, a new podcast, The Good Quest. That's it. That is the trailer. Less than 10 seconds long, and there's nothing else to it. There is nothing else to say what it is, just The Good Quest. Is it a religious thing? Is it a podcast about tabletop gaming? Is it a podcast about online gaming? What is it? I'm sorry, but with all of the podcasts that are out there now, what is the sell here? Is the everyday John or Jane Doe, or any other name you can think of for everything else going around in the world, going to check a show out that they don't have a clue about? I don't know. You can find Pods Like Us anywhere that podcasts can be found, and all of the links to the social media and email are available on the opening page of themarvzone.org. That's the Marv, spelled M-A-R-V, zone.org. The show is distributed and sponsored by RSS.com, and we thank them for their support. Please rate and review the show on the platform that you are listening or viewing the episode on. All feedback is gratefully received, as it helps to know if there is anything that needs to be looked at. Thank you for listening, and I hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.